first step to creating a drawing based on your fingerprint is to get a fingerprint. So if you look at your fingerprints, it's kind of hard to see on the video, but when you look at your fingers in person, you can see different patterns, and you have mountains and valleys and peaks and whirls and swirls, and everybody's fingerprint patterns are unique combination to them. So you can make more than one fingerprint, but we are going to use these ink pads. All right, but your first step is going to be to sanitize your hands. All right, because we only have one ink pad per table, so we're sharing. So you want to make sure your hands are clean before you're touching the ink pad. Then you ink up your finger, and I just rock it back and forth a little bit like this. And then you print it on the paper. And there again, if you kind of just rock it gently back and forth, you get a little bit better print. Now you can see I got a real pretty nice, clean fingerprint on this one. But if you're having trouble, one trick is to ink your finger, grab a piece of clear Scotch tape, stick the tape over your fingerprint, and then put that in your sketchbook. All right, so you can see that we kind of have the same result in two different ways. So whichever one works best for you is the one that you use. Like I said, you can do more than one finger. You want to have some options for what pattern of fingerprints, lines you're going to observe for your project. So get yourself a nice clean fingerprint, and then we will go to the next step, which is to transfer those lines. You're going to observe the lines to another paper. Once you're satisfied that you have a nice clean fingerprint that you can look at, you're going to use this information to draw your fingerprint large for your paper. Now here's one that I started, and you can see that the lines fill up most of the page. Don't make it small in the middle. That makes your job much more difficult to add the typography later. So you want to try to fill up a fair amount of the page. I've seen students who literally enlarge it so that it runs all the way off the page, but I chose to keep this edge of my fingerprint visible on the paper so that it's obvious that it's a fingerprint. Right, there's a few ways to approach this. You want to first start by finding a light pencil. Sometimes they're called layout. It's backwards for you. How about this? Sometimes it's called a layout pencil, but you're going to look for a light one that has an H in the name. And when we get to shading, you'll understand this, but the H pencils are harder. They draw lighter. So if you make mistakes, they erase easier is the idea. All right, I'm going to use a darker pencil so you can see it, because if I draw on here with this, it doesn't show up on my video. And that's good because it's light enough that I can erase it later. So when you look at this fingerprint, you can just look at it and start to observe how the lines line up. So when I look at this, I have a little mountain peak right in here. So I can come right over here and draw that mountain peak in, and then start filling in the lines around it. This is all about observing line direction. Another approach that could be taken is to divide this into quarters, and then you lightly divide your paper into quarters and use that as a reference point. So the top of this mountain happens right where the lines cross. So I would come in here and I would draw in the top of that mountain happening where the lines cross. This is the edge of my fingerprint here. Notice I'm just using sketchy lines, right? Because ultimately they're going to be erased. Once the typography goes on, the extra lines go away. So now when I look at it, here's the top of the mountain, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 before I have a little bit of a peak. So that peak is about halfway down between the center and the bottom. So about halfway down is here. So that peak shape would go in here. And then I need 4 lines in between that follow this same curve. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So after that, I would just keep observing how the lines line up and put them on my paper. This is creating a framework on which we build the text or the typography piece of it later on. So your goal is to use the H pencil to draw lightly the lines that you observe of your fingerprint. So you're just looking at these flat lines and putting them on this other paper.